Sambo Steve, how you doing today?
Doing all right, man. What's up?
So you've been at the forefront of the grassroots movement here in New York. What's the situation now?
Well, in some ways, it's Groundhog Day. The legislation has gone through the Senate, as it has for the last 4 years. It's been introduced to the Assembly last week. So we're sort of in that ballpark. We're just where we are every year about this time, waiting to see what's going to happen in the Assembly. Parallel to that, we've got the federal lawsuit, which is sort of in the paper chase mode. You know, they had their day in court. They tried to settle. New York State wouldn't settle. So now we're back to more paper chasing and waiting to see what's going to happen with that. But we've got a thriving amateur scene, and we know because of the federal lawsuit that we could have pro MMA if they use the third-party sanctioning pathway. So, you know, we're slowly moving towards where we want to be.
What are your thoughts on the amateur scene? I've seen you at local shows, so what do you think about them?
Well, as a fan, I love it. You know, it's some of the local shows. There have been great fights, some really competitive fights, and I'm glad to see more opportunities for our local athletes. And I'm glad to see promoters stepping up and trying to offer this opportunity to our local athletes. From someone who's looking at the regulation side, I think there's a lot of problems with the fact that there's not any real oversight, and that in New York State we have a Wild West kind of attitude with amateur MMA, and so you can get anything from, say, a UCL, NHB rules with absolutely no oversight, all the way up to, say, like a TNT Fights, who uses ABC, certified officials and does everything as if it were regulated by a state commission, and then you've got everything in between. So from that side of things, as a coach, I always try to really research, where my guys might be fighting to make sure they're at least taking some basic safety measures for them.
Now, there was just a death in amateur MMA in Michigan, which is unregulated, legal but unregulated there. What's the risk of that happening here in New York?
Well, in that particular show, there was no doctor present, there was no ambulance present. The fighters did not have to get a pre-fight physical or blood tests. So in a show like that in New York, sure, you run the same risk. Anytime you have a fighter getting into the cage without having taken any kind of basic preparatory moves, in terms of checking their own health, and you always run the risk of that kind of thing. Truth be told, even if that guy had a physical, we don't know why he died, and we may not know if what caused that death would have ever been discovered. But for my money, any promoter worth his salt doing shows, especially in New York, should be making these types of things mandatory. Having ringside doctors and making sure that guys are getting physicals and blood tests, and at least taking some basic safeguards. I don't know why a promoter running shows wouldn't do that, even just for their own liability purposes. But as a coach, I don't want my guys fighting in events that I know the other person hasn't had his blood tested and stuff like that. There's runs too much risk. I don't want my guy going up against a dude who's suspended elsewhere because he has hepatitis or something like that. So there are certain basic guidelines that if they're not met, then our guys aren't fighting in them.
Okay, real quick, your thoughts, your opinion on if it's going to be this year that pro MMA is sanctioned by the state of New York.
Well, if you would have asked me this a couple months ago, I would have been really like 80% thinking we're going to get it this year. And when I say that, what I mean in Albany. What I'm hearing now is a little bit more pessimistic from the people in Albany, so I think it's real important for the fans to contact their legislators. One of the things that I've heard from the people I've spoken to from Albany is that the assemblymen are basically saying, look, we're not hearing from our constituents. We're hearing from the people in Las Vegas, we're hearing from World Series of Fighting, we're hearing from UFC, but we're not hearing from New Yorkers. And I hate to say it, but some of the majority of the New York fans are pretty apathetic in terms of getting involved, and that lack of involvement could be what hurts us this year. So I would just suggest everybody contact your legislator, tell them you want this legislation to pass in Albany, in the Assembly.
All right, thank you very much.
You got it.